The German army in the Second World War relied on a series of light armored vehicles armed with powerful anti-tank guns, capable of taking out most enemy tanks they encountered. These tank destroyers were born out of a necessity, serving as stopgap solutions to counter increasingly formidable Allied armor, when no better alternatives were immediately available. While not perfect, they performed well during the war, especially when operated by skilled and experienced crews. Like all military innovations, Germany's tank destroyer doctrine had a starting point: the Panzerjäger I. Built on the chassis of the Panzer I light tank and equipped with a captured Czechoslovak anti-tank gun, the Panzerjäger I represented the German army's first foray into converting tanks into dedicated tank destroyers. Entering service in May 1940, Panzerjäger I remained in use until 1943, laying the groundwork for the more advanced Panzerjäger designs that followed. But before we continue, this video article is brought to you by you! A huge thank you to all our amazing patrons for helping us keep the lights on here at Tank Encyclopedia. If you'd like to support us, you can join us for as little as $1 a month. With our tight margins, every dollar counts and every dollar goes directly back into books, illustrations, and video production, helping us create even better content. Plus, as a patron, you'll unlock exclusive rewards and perks. Join our Patreon today, or at least consider it. Alright, back to the Panzerjäger. By the 1930s, German rearmament was accelerating, with the rapid expansion of the army and development of new military equipment. One key focus was finding effective methods to counter enemy tanks. The Wehrmacht placed a high value on mobility, a principle integral to the so-called blitzkrieg tactics. While often hailed as revolutionary, the idea of striking quickly and decisively was a long-standing doctrine of the German military, emphasizing speed and surprise across all branches, including the newly developed anti-tank units. After all, an anti-tank gun is only effective if it can be rapidly deployed to the area where the enemy tanks are attacking. At the start of World War II, the 3.7cm PaK was the only dedicated anti-tank weapon in the German arsenal. Its lightweight, compact design made it easy to deploy quickly while being inexpensive and simple to conceal. For its time, it was adequate to counter most armored threats on the battlefield. However, the gun's dependence on towing and the time required to set it up for combat were notable drawbacks. Some voices within the German army advocated for the development of a self-propelled variant, believing it could enhance the gun's battlefield effectiveness by increasing mobility and reducing setup time. Although early attempts were made to pursue this concept, budget constraints ultimately hindered significant progress during the pre-war years. The question of mounting a 3.7cm gun on a self-propelled chassis remained a contentious issue. Dedicating an entire vehicle to such a small, barely adequate gun seemed like a waste of valuable resources. Fortunately for the Germans, a better anti-tank weapon soon became available. Following the annexation of Czechoslovakia, the Wehrmacht inherited a vast arsenal of modern Czech weapons, including the 4.7cm PuV VZ-38 anti-tank guns. Despite their somewhat archaic appearance, these guns offered superior performance compared to the 3.7, as implied by the difference in caliber between the two. Following the successful conclusion of the Polish campaign, it became clear that a self-propelled anti-tank gun would be highly beneficial. Although the Germans rarely encountered Polish armored vehicles, anti-tank guns still proved invaluable for neutralizing enemy positions, including artillery emplacements and machine gun nests. Mounting such a gun on a self-propelled chassis would further enhance its effectiveness, allowing it to quickly reposition during combat and respond to shifting battlefield conditions. Answering the call, the German Ordnance Department proposed mounting the captured 4.7cm anti-tank guns on the Panzer I Ausführung B chassis. This decision was driven by several factors. Although a truck would provide excellent mobility on good roads, they struggle significantly on rough terrain. Additionally, they could not be effectively armored without overloading the chassis. Half-tracks were also considered and even tested, but they proved too expensive. As a result, the decision was made to use whatever was available in sufficient numbers that could be cheaply and quickly converted, and the Panzer I fit this criteria well. The Polish campaign had already demonstrated that its effectiveness as a frontline tank was limited. The Germans were forced to use it because they had nothing else. While the larger Panzer II might have been an even better choice, it was still considered good enough as a combat tank despite being armed with only a 2cm cannon. Lastly, a fully tracked chassis of the Panzer I offered decent off-road performance, allowing it to keep up with mechanized infantry. Once the chassis and the main armament was spoken for, the next step was selecting the firm that would design and build the thing. The Germans chose Alket for this task. In early 1940, Alket produced the first drawings that would become the first Panzerjäger, or tank hunter. The conversion process proved feasible and relatively simple to construct. A prototype was presented to Adolf Hitler in February 1940, and following this demonstration, an official order for approximately 132 vehicles was placed with Alket. These vehicles were to be completed by May 1940. In September 1940, additional orders for 70 more were placed. Of these, 10 were built by Alket and the remaining 60 by Kleckner Humboldt Deutz. As with many other German vehicles, this one was given several similar designations. One of these was the 4.7 cm PaK auf Panzer I Ausführung B. However, in most historical references covering this tank, it is simply referred to as the Panzerjager I. For the sake of simplicity, we'll just call it that. For the construction of the new Panzerjager I, most of the Panzer I chassis remained unchanged, including its engine and 5 road wheel suspension system. There was no need to modify these components, as the primary goal was to create a solution that was both inexpensive and quick to produce. The vehicle was powered by a Maybach NL38TR engine, capable of delivering 100 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. Due to the additional equipment and weaponry, the vehicle's weight increased from 5.8 to 6.4 tons. Despite this increase, the maximum speed remained unchanged, 40 km per hour. The most obvious modification was the removal of the turret. Additionally, the top and part of the rear superstructure armor were taken off. This was necessary to make space for the new gun and to accommodate the crew. The 4.7 cm gun was placed on a specially designed mount located inside the vehicle hull. For better stability, the gun mount was secured by 3 metal support bars. 2 vertical bars connected to the vehicle's floor and a larger one attached to the rear engine compartment. The 4.7 cm gun, now mounted without its original shield, wheels, and trail legs, served as the main armament. Known in German service as the 4.7 cm PaK 36T, it was an effective anti-tank gun during the early stages of the war. The standard armor-piercing round had a muzzle velocity of 775 meters per second and an effective range of up to 1.5 kilometers. At a range of 500 meters, it could penetrate 47 millimeters of armor using the standard armor-piercing round. Additionally, it was capable of firing high explosive rounds with impact fuses, which were effective against light armor and infantry. It had an elevation range of -8 to +10, and a traverse of 17.5 degrees to each side. Both elevation and traverse were controlled by 2 hand wheels located on the left side of the gun. The vehicle could carry a total of 86 rounds stored in 5 different ammunition boxes. The crew operating this gun were protected by a 5-sided armored compartment with 14.5 millimeters of armor. However, due to weight constraints, the rear and top were left open. This compartment was bolted to the vehicle hull, which made replacements and repairs easy. In the second series of vehicles, 2 additional armor plates were added, improving the protection of the crew compartment from the sides. The Panzerjager I was manned by a crew of 3. The driver was seated inside the vehicle's hull, while the commander/gunner sat on the left side of the gun, with the loader positioned opposite him on the right. To store spare equipment and used ammunition casings, a metal or mesh wire basket was welded to the rear above the engine compartment. The Panzerjager I vehicles were assigned to specialized anti-tank battalions. Each battalion was typically divided into 3 companies, each consisting of 3 vehicles. However, some units had companies with 6 vehicles instead. In perfect conditions, these anti-tank battalions would be equipped with a total of 27 Panzerjager Is. On May 10, 1940, the Germans launched their offensive against the Western Allies. At that time, only the 521st Panzerjager I anti-tank battalion, equipped with 18 vehicles, was fully combat ready. 3 additional units, the 616th, 643rd, and 670th, were gradually sent to the front as they reached operational readiness. The Panzerjager I proved effective during the French campaign. After action reports noted that its 4.7 cm gun could pierce the armor of an unspecified 32-ton tank, likely a B-1 or B-1 bis, at ranges up to 600 meters. Other tanks' armor could be penetrated at distances of up to 900 meters. Though primarily designed for tank combat, the Panzerjager I was often deployed in attacking bunkers, machine gun nests, or other fortified positions. A report from the 18th Infantry Division emphasized the vehicle's effectiveness. Quote, "The 4.7 cm PaK Ausführung Selbstverteidigung has proven itself very effective not only against tanks but also against buildings during urban combat. It had a significant physical and demoralizing effect on the enemy." Unquote. However, several significant flaws were also noted. Despite offering better mobility than towed anti-tank guns, the Panzer I chassis proved surprisingly unreliable. It was often plagued by mechanical issues with its suspension as well as engine overheating problems. Additionally, the lack of proper telescopic sights made observing the surroundings extremely dangerous for the crew. There were numerous instances where crew members were killed by headshots while attempting to observe from above the shielded compartment. This sometimes forced the Panzerjager I commanders to rely solely on the narrow field of view provided by the gun sight, which was especially hard to use when the vehicle was moving. Another issue was the lack of effective communication equipment between the commander and the driver. The noise from the engine made it nearly impossible for the driver to hear commander's orders. Furthermore, the armor protection was minimal, to say the least, making the vehicle vulnerable to almost any anti-tank weapon. Following the German victory in the West, the Panzerjager I next saw action in North Africa. The 605th Battalion, equipped with 27 vehicles, arrived on this front in March 1941 and engaged in extensive combat against British armor. However, the open terrain of North Africa proved challenging for these lightly protected vehicles, as there was little cover available for camouflage. As such, the losses quickly mounted. For instance, during Operation Crusader in November 1941, the unit lost 13 vehicles. Due to supply issues, Panzer I tanks had to be cannibalized for spare parts. By the end of 1941, the 605th had only 14 operational vehicles left, and the replacements arrived in the form of half-tracks armed with 7.62 cm guns. By the time of the Battle of El Alamein in October 1942, only 11 vehicles were reported as operational, and all were likely lost by the end of that year. For the invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, 5 battalions equipped with Panzerjager Is were available. These were the 521st, 529th, 616th, 643rd, and 670th battalions, fielding a total of 135 vehicles. Further battalions were equipped with the new tank hunters, which were converted from captured French R-35 tanks. These conversions involved installing a new superstructure armed with the 4.7 cm anti-tank gun. By the outbreak of war with the Soviet Union, approximately 174 anti-tank variants and 26 command variants of these vehicles have been produced. These were used in the same role as the Panzerjager I, but proved significantly worse because of mechanical issues with the chassis. During this campaign, despite protests from the crews, the Panzerjager I was often used as an assault gun, a role it was neither designed nor suited for. With its thin armor, attacking fortified positions defended by anti-tank or artillery guns was almost suicidal. A notable example occurred during an attack on Soviet positions near Mogilov, where the 521st Battalion lost 5 vehicles, some of which were destroyed before even having the chance to return fire. Nevertheless, the employment of the Panzerjager I as a support weapon against unarmored targets continued, and it is best illustrated by ammunition expenditures. Between the launch of Operation Barbarossa and the end of 1941, Panzerjager I units fired 21,103 armor-piercing and 31,195 high-explosive rounds. Engagements with enemy tanks were common, but a particularly unusual encounter took place near Voronezh in August 1941, involving a Panzerjager I from the 521st Battalion and a Soviet BT tank. When the BT crew spotted the German tank destroyer, the Soviet commander made the bold decision to ram it. The Panzerjager I managed to fire 2 shots at the approaching BT tank. Despite being hit and catching fire, the BT continued its advance and ultimately rammed the thing. Although the Panzerjager I sustained damage, it remained operational, and the driver was able to pull back, saving the vehicle from the flames. The Panzerjager I was one of the few vehicles capable of destroying a T-34 at close range. Firing trials conducted by the 252nd Infantry Division in late October 1941 on captured tanks revealed that the 4.7 cm could penetrate the turret armor of the T-34 at a distance of 200 meters. The side hull armor could be pierced at 500 meters. However, the KV-1's turret armor could only be penetrated at a range of 50 meters, while its side and rear hull armor could be breached at 200. The German losses by the end of 1941 were staggering, with around 140 4.7 cm self-propelled vehicles of both types lost. By 1942, these units gradually began to replace their vehicles with the new Marder series. Although lightly protected, the Marders brought bigger guns to the fight and saw service until the end of the war. The surviving Panzerjager I became obsolete by late 1942, and most, if not all, were removed from service by the start of the following year. All were sent back to Germany and stored, with some likely repurposing as training vehicles. In the final days of the war, some may have been returned to action in a desperate attempt to fend off the advancing Allies. Hell, one was even fitted with a 7.5 centimeter long gun. This concludes our video on the first German self-propelled anti-tank vehicle. What do you think about this early attempt to create a tank hunter by utilizing an obsolete chassis with a good anti-tank gun? Share your opinions in the comment section below. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe and stay updated on future content. If you'd like to contribute further, consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. We want to especially thank our medium and heavy tank Patreon supporters: Alex Harvey, Dan Fitzpatrick, Dave Schuford, Leslie Hulkower, Michael Herman, Owen M., Peter Bradbury, and Wolfhund. Your generous contributions help fund our research, illustrations, and video production. Until next time, keep us in your sights.